Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mark Gabberti, and this is the podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking for the breakthrough for their businesses. The way we promote our content determines how many people see it. Some people get a few people to visit their sites, while others can attract millions of new visitors to their content in a given year. While there are several differences between sites that get this amount of visitors and sites that don't get as many, the key differences reside in the promotion. And in this episode, you'll learn how to win at content marketing from one of the most successful bloggers in the space. Today's guest teaches people how to win at business and life in a digital world. He attracts millions of visitors a year to his blog and has cultivated a tribe of over 600,000 social media followers. He's been featured in prominent publications, including multiple features in Forbes for his work in social media marketing and content marketing. Today's guest for episode 124 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Jeff Bullas. Jeff, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi, Mark, and it's great to be here. So from my home office in Sydney, Australia. So we're doing it from the other side of the world, which I just love the way tech's evolved over the years since we started with delivering milk by horse and cart. Now we're actually mobile phones. So it's just fabulous to use the tech to connect people globally that love sharing ideas. So great to be here, Mark.
Jeff, it is such a pleasure. And I mean, for people who don't know the whole story, I've literally read Jeff's blog like countless times, and I attribute his blog to all the success that I've achieved on Twitter and some of the other social networks. So I'm really excited to dig deep into this interview. But before we do that, I'd love to get some backstory. So Jeff, what first brought you into the blogging world? How did all of this start?
I was between jobs, which is code for unemployed, and I had time to read. So I'd read a book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek, which a lot of people have heard of. And I said, okay. And his take, of course, is in creating a business and a lifestyle around this digital world. And I went, that sounds pretty cool. I'd just closed a retail business. It was very much in the physical world. So, building something online that you actually could take with you anywhere and create a lifestyle business was very attractive to me. And then David Meerman Scott's book, The New Rules of Marketing PR, caught my attention, and I devoured that more than once. I read that maybe 2 or 3 times and marked it. And the concept of actually attracting an audience and traffic through creating content sounded like a good idea. And then I read a blog post by HubSpot said, if you want to start a business or want to create a business online and share your ideas, just start a blog. And I didn't even know what a blog was at the time. So that was in 2008, and in 2009 I actually kicked it off in March 2009. So it was really, I suppose, an experiment in one sense and a passion project that just came out of what I discovered through reading Tim Ferriss's book, and especially David Meerman Scott's book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR. So I started creating content, started writing late at night, and started building my Twitter following because I realized I could share links on Twitter easily, and headlines seemed to work well to get attention and drive traffic to the blog. So that's how it all started. It was just a passion project, sort of escaped the lab over time, and it was I suppose my own little grand experiment. And guess what? It worked. And timing was also in my favor because there wasn't many bloggers talking about social media back then. And it was my observation of social media's power to distribute content and to build, I suppose, a global tribe in your niche. So that's how it all happened, because I actually saw, it was the other thing that happened too was actually the social media side. I was going out with a lady at the time, and she said, why don't you join Facebook? And I joined Facebook and went, wow, when I joined, all these people turned up I hadn't seen in 20 or 30 years, looking a lot older, a little grayer, less hair. I'm just talking about the guys at this stage. And that was really fascinating. And I went, wow, this is really cool. And then Twitter happened. And when I joined, there's only about 80 million on Facebook. So compared to it was 2.2 billion today and 5 million on Twitter. So it was early days, but it was a pretty authentic space, and that really excited me. And so my topic for the blog was just talking about social media and sharing what I read, and that's how it all started.
And you were one of the pioneers that like really set the trend for teaching people how to use social media to promote their businesses. And it's interesting how you approach this as an experiment, as something that you just wanted to do because this was something that was driving you. You had a passion towards it. And now you have this gigantic social media empire, multiple features in Forbes. And I'm wondering, how can we optimize our social media activity to get more traffic? Because some people are active on there, but it's not fully optimized. So how do we do that?
That's a short question with a long answer. The reality is that organic social traffic is getting harder because the platforms have moved from organic to very much pay to play. But it doesn't mean they don't work. Twitter is still very good for driving traffic. Facebook's getting harder. Organic reach for pages is almost impossible unless you pay for it. But you still can generate attention, and Twitter's my main way of doing that, and growing followers is one way of doing that. Mark, you've done that as well. But generating followers on Twitter means that they're going to see your content in their stream. And you've got to think of Twitter as not as an inbox so much as a stream of consciousness. It's really people sharing their ideas in a stream that goes past you. The more followers you have, it turns from a stream into a torrent. And the reality is that building a Twitter following then leads to discovery, which then leads to actually people discovering your content because they go to your website. Then you start developing authority with Google. So it's a multi-channel approach, and today I have about 65% of my traffic comes from organic Google search, which is millions of visitors a year. Twitter is still my discovery channel, if you like. Facebook I post on, and yes, traffic comes from that. And LinkedIn is a very interesting place at the moment where you can actually write posts and share it, and you can get some real attention there as well. So LinkedIn's because this whole space just keeps evolving. And if you just take one approach, I'm just going to concentrate just on LinkedIn, it's the only channel I'm going to have. It's a bit of a dangerous place to play if you do that, because the reality is that they keep changing the algorithms because the platforms are all now about monetizing and making money from their platforms. So you've got to be very wary that you just don't want to be putting all your eggs in one basket.
Wow, that's a really interesting view because I've liked the idea of focusing on one social network to master it. But I mean, with Facebook, for instance, like if you mastered it and then they make that algorithm change, like it's sort of back to square one with a single change. So, I mean, now that I think of it that way, it's better to have a few social networks that you're good at instead of only mastering one of them. So, I mean, that's a really great insight. And social media is just one of the many channels we can use to promote our content, obviously a really big one. But when you publish a new piece of content, what do you do to prepare it for publication and then promote it once it's published? What is the Jeff Bullas game plan?
There's quite a few, I suppose, key things that you need to include. Number one, you need to write a good headline. Then when you write your blog post, you need to make sure that it's optimized for search engines. So that might mean that you write a nice description of what the article's about. That's the one that appears in the meta description in an organic Google search. The first sentence will actually appear underneath the headline. So number one, the headline. Number two, the meta description. You want people to click through and read the rest of the article. So you optimize after you've written a good headline. You make sure that you've optimized it, and you can get apps like Yoast that I plug in for WordPress sites that allows you to, and that gives you like the 4 or 5 key things that you need to do to make sure that you're giving it the best chance of Google to discover you and then to rank you and then for people to actually click through to your site. So when we publish it, we then amplify it on social. So we'll actually share it on Twitter multiple times first day. We'll experiment with the different images as well, because a lot of people just tweet out something without using an image. I find something like a mini infographic that might be embedded in your post can work quite well. So we experiment with 3 or 4 different images each day for each post and see which one works the best. Then that goes into a recurring tweet that goes out every 5 to 6 days. So we really try and get both what I write and other people write, because we have a lot of guest authors on our site, to write evergreen content. And evergreen content is content that doesn't date easily. So it's not the latest news for the day. It's not what Trump did that day because it's old news tomorrow. But the reality is that you've got to create content that's got some endurance. That's evergreen content. Then we also go and post it on LinkedIn. We also send out email to my followers and subscribers. We'll share it on Facebook. We'll then actually put it to Pinterest. We'll actually put it on Instagram. And a lot of these small things can be automated with marketing automation, social media platforms such as Agora Pulse and so on. So the reality is that if you did everything manually, you're never going to be able to do any meaningful work. You'll just be on Twitter all the time. You'll be on LinkedIn all the time. So you've got to use automation to help you get your content out there. So it's a multiple channel approach to make sure that people discover you, read you, and then keep coming back. One of the biggest mistakes I made early on was actually not building my email list in a very focused way. So today I have multiple ways of doing that through pop-ups, exit on intent pop-ups. We use it with banners on the side. We use it with banners underneath the posts. So it's a whole range of ways. We actually developed a survey which people to participate can actually have to put in their email address. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to actually build your email list. So it's not, I've got one Twitter account, I'll just tweet, I'll build that up, that's all I do, because that's a really risky approach because Twitter may change the algorithm tomorrow. And they do. They've actually changed it. The organic reach of Twitter is not what it used to be. Facebook's maybe one of the worst offenders. You can actually earn authority with Google. That's why Google SEO traffic, organic search results, people looking through you by putting an inquiry into a search engine. The issue I really have with Facebook is that they don't allow you to really earn any authority. They're relying upon viral content and they really just want you to pay. So I think there's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised over time that their algorithm will change. They've been pushed into, because this whole fake news thing is putting some real pressure on them to actually be more mindful of creating content that is actually authentic, real, and good for humanity, which is supposedly Mark Zuckerberg's mission in life, is to connect the world and make it a better place. But I think the basis of Facebook has got to a place where pay to play made it easier for people to use it for evil, and we don't want that, do we?
It's really interesting to hear these different views of social media. I mean, like looking deep into the algorithms and like the structures of each social network, and Twitter is both of our favorites, but do you see a good number two? Like, would you say LinkedIn is a good number two, or do you see another social network as other than Twitter that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, well, my top three are Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. You can't ignore Facebook. So post to Facebook, so it still leads to discovery. There is organic left in it, but it's in the one-figure percentages. If you get it to go viral, great. I really find it hard to get stuff to go viral on Facebook unless it's really out there and weird and strange, and that's not where we play, where I like to play anyway. So pick, one rule of thumb is to pick 3 social media platforms that you're comfortable with and you'd like to develop some expertise in. Maybe really focus on one, but don't put all your eggs in that, but become really good at one, like whether it's Facebook or whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's Twitter. LinkedIn's organic opportunities, I think, have really increased in the last 12 months, which is quite strange in the general direction of social media platforms going to asking people to actually pull out their credit card to actually get any attention. Because that's what really excited everyone back in 10 years ago was social media. You didn't have to pay for attention. You could earn it. You could build your own distribution to reach the world. And you still can. It's just a little harder. But that's what I loved back then was I didn't have to beg permission or pay for attention with the big media moguls or newspapers. I could actually do it myself. And you still can. So that's what really excited me back then, and the ability to actually democratization of marketing and publishing is still in play, which is great and gives everyone a chance to actually share their story and their ideas. And I think for the planet generally, it's wonderful for humanity.
Listening to this conversation right now from the host side, I mean, it's a reminder of what social media was meant to be. Like, obviously, like it's a great place to grow a business and communicate with more people, but it's that whole idea of being able to interact with people and not having to pay to get your message out, but being able to interact on that level where you could just earn your way towards that level of attention that you create for yourself. And I know with search engines, you could also earn your way to the top, but there are like certain tools now that some people feel are essential where you have to pay like SEMrush being a good tool, but like it's an investment. So what are your
Yep.
thoughts on growing search engine traffic and possibly investing in tools like that?
Yeah, different tools that help you improve your SEO are pretty vital. There's two aspects to SEO if we want to distill it down to its two core pillars. Number one, there's technical SEO, search engine. In other words, build your site so it loads fast, it's viewable on mobile, it makes it easy for the crawlers such as Yahoo and Bing and of course Google, which is the biggest one, to actually find you easily. So that comes down to site maps and all the technical pieces. So the first one of the most important pillars, number one, is actually making sure your site is designed well technically for discovery and optimization so you can rank. Number two, then the next piece is the creation of content that adds value to people's lives. And that's what Google wants it to do. It wants great content to come to the surface, to rise to the top. So there's the two pieces you really need to make sure of, is that you, number one, technically build your site well, and number two, you need to create great content on that foundation that you then share with the world, and then you can rank for, long tail keywords such as 5 or 6 words. People are using longer phrases now to actually search for content because the search engines are so good now that you can type in a question and you come up with some of the best content in the world straight away. I remember I initially was using search engines and browsers back in, the mid-1990s when Netscape came out, and it was like a lucky dip. Lucky if you could find anything. Sometimes you had to go to page 19, 20 to find anything that was relevant. But today the search engines are so good that you actually can get fabulous information straight away. So they're the two pillars of SEO that you really need to make sure that you are doing well. And this is going to be a long game. This is not something that you're going to get instant results next day or tomorrow. A lot of people are just after expediency. They just want, okay, I want a quick fix. I want a get-rich-quick scheme. But the real power and the real opportunity lies in playing the long game and making sure that you're investing. My goal is to, still be creating stuff of value in a decade, 2 decades time. So don't play, the expedient game of quick wins all the time. You're going to be disappointed. You need to play the long game.
And I really love that focus on the long term because short term is like something that usually gives a small result, while long term you usually get those bigger results where you're able to create a bigger impact. And one of the things that I've heard that's been sort of a trend in our time together is that the headlines are really important. When I asked you about prepping a blog post for publication and promoting it, headlines were the first thing you mentioned. And I feel like a lot of people talk about how headlines are so important for getting that traffic. So what are your recommendations for creating a quality headline that is going to get attention and clicks?
Yeah, just go in and Google some, great headline tips. We've got some on our site, my site. Just start teaching yourself the art and science of writing good headlines. So it's essentially the first part of good copywriting. So good copywriting skills, go and have a look at some of the best in the world. Some of them, and you're going to end up with this spectrum of headlines. It'll go from the BuzzFeed type headlines, which are, the term is often used as clickbait. In other words, it's so sort of out there and viral that people you just have to click, Clickbait is an interesting term. Clickbait is where you actually write a headline and then people click through and then actually it doesn't deliver on the headline promise. And I find that really annoying. A great headline should still deliver on the promise. Okay, it gets the attention, but it should also deliver. And I remember writing a Facebook post about 4 years ago, and the headline was "Why You Should Forget Facebook," right? And it went viral, not initially on my blog, but when I actually posted it on LinkedIn. Ended up getting 1,000 comments and 300,000 views. And this is about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a top-performing article on LinkedIn globally for a week. So, but the content still delivered on the promise, and the headline was "Why Should We Forget Facebook?" And it was actually an article about you should forget about Facebook for organic reach generally as a user. Organic reach is being wound back from 20s and 30% down to 1s and 2 and 3%. So it delivered on the promise of the headline. So that's not clickbait. That's just a good headline. Clickbait, in its true sense, is a headline. The content doesn't actually deliver what the headline promises. So, yeah.
And I love that idea how, yes, you're optimizing your headline, you're making it great, but you have to stay focused on that promise. And you don't want to just write something to get clicks and then it doesn't deliver on the promise, because a click, that person becomes a visitor, and then it's up to you to provide them with that valuable experience where they would come back for more and more content. And clickbait, that's just one of the mistakes that can be made when it comes to getting more traffic to our content. But you mentioned earlier another mistake was not starting the email list soon enough. And I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the other mistakes that you see a lot of people making when they try to get more traffic.
Okay, we mentioned some of them before, but number one is just concentrating on social as to actually drive traffic. So a lot of people just say, well, social media is this big thing, 2 billion people on Facebook, so I'm just going to say Facebook, and that's going to give me all my traffic. The reality is, even with my large social following on Twitter and Facebook, I've got about 700,000 plus, over 750,000 actually. So it still only drives about 12% of my traffic, whereas organic reach from a search engine drives 65%. And then my email list is great, because the reality is with email is that you actually can reach your audience when you want to. In other words, you can actually send an email and going, here's my latest blog post, or if you're trying to sell something, you can put them into a sales funnel. But the reality is you have more control over email. But the other one that's emerging, which is certainly worth really starting to invest in and test and use, is Facebook Messenger, because there are so many people using Facebook Messenger that the reality is that you need to learn how to use that. And then automation's the other one. So there's a whole bunch of things. It's a big ecosystem. It gets very overwhelming and very confusing. Is to try and just distill it down and do 2 or 3 things well and then go from there. It's just small increments each day that in the years to come will actually produce the big benefits. So I just, just like content, you just write 1 blog post a week or 1 blog post a day. And over time, you build a body of work and eventually go, oh, gee, I've got 2,000 articles. I'm ranking, I'm getting 50% of my traffic from Google. So, that's the reality, is that playing the long game means that you're just doing something every day and delaying gratification, not going out and having a good party every night, but maybe sitting down and writing a blog post every second night. So, and the results for me when I started getting invited to speak around the world, just because I was creating content and sharing it, was surprising, and I still get surprised today.
Now, throughout your journey, you've achieved a lot of success, and you've been able to help people like me achieve success in our own journeys. And I mean, I can only imagine the amount of people who you've been able to interact with and spread your message to. But one of the things that we're all doing is we all have different goals for ourselves. We're all trying to accomplish them, but sometimes we fall just short, and we're trying to get the leverage back to accomplish that goal. So I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential? I
think they're afraid of making mistakes. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. of looking stupid. And the reality is that we all make mistakes. So you got to be constantly experimenting and trying. And you're looking for small wins that all over time add up to, a bigger win. And one of the challenges with people is they quite often just chase the money. That's the other thing, instead of doing what their passionate purpose should be. If you're following your passionate purpose, doesn't mean you might be a Mark Zuckerberg and a billionaire, but it might mean you actually create a lifestyle that gives you freedom. And what's freedom? Freedom is actually the ability to do things when you want to, rather than being told by a boss that you've got to show up every day at 9 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. and do stuff you don't want to do every day. So, success, I think you've got to be really careful too that you see success through someone else's eyes. In other words, success is a very individual thing. And saying, look, and this is one of the big issues with socials. You look at, what people are achieving all around the world, and they're doing this, and they're making $1 million a day, and you're going, well, I'm not doing all that. Okay, you got to compare yourself to what you were yesterday, not to what other people are doing globally around the world. Because if you are always defining yourself on other people's success, you are going to feel like a failure every day. So compare yourself to yesterday, not to everyone else around the world.
Jeff, that's such an amazing insight, because I feel like we do look at people who are at a level of success and we want to reach that level of success. We compare ourselves to others, but it's best to look at what we did yesterday and be better than who we were at that level, and constantly to self-improve, because you just compound that so much and build upon the current success that you've already built by just focusing on being better than who you were yesterday. And one of the things that I know is true for all of us is that we've all faced certain challenges throughout our journeys. I feel like it's one of the reasons some of us look at successful people and compare and just wish we were moving the needle a little more. But I know you faced certain challenges yourself. So Jeff, I'm wondering if you could share with us one big challenge you faced in your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
One of the big challenges happened when I was a 5-year-old. I had asthma, and I suffered with it quite badly as a child. And I was about 11 or 12, and Mum took me to the doctor, and she, as I was talking to the doctor said, well, we've discovered that actually if you do exercise, it can improve. But, research has shown that exercise will actually help asthma. So the next day, being old enough now to take some action, I actually started running, just a small run around the block. And it was just, a few hundred meters, but I did it. And the next day I got up, tried to get my brothers to do it with me. And they sort of said, well, you got the asthma, we don't. So off you go. So they actually ran with me one morning. That was about it. So every day I showed up just doing a little run around the block in front of the park, in front of our family home. And I discovered that every day by doing that and showing up and doing the small thing, and this came out of pain, okay? So I was motivated by actually trying to overcome suffering. And as human beings, there is one common thing we all have. Life is never going to be always rosy. We're going to have to struggle and rise beyond what we have. We need to transcend pain and suffering. So for me, pain for me is a pathway to success. You need to transcend it. And for me, one of the biggest learnings I had, which I didn't realize at the time, was at the age of 11 or 12, I decided to actually take action, just one small step literally every day to run. And guess what? As I started to run more, I started to run up into the hills around home. I'd be gone for hours. Maybe I was the original Forrest Gump, just went running. And then I started to win championships and became one of the top runners in the state at the age of 15. And for me, the lesson from that, and I didn't even realize it at the time, was that you need to, you either let wallow in pain and suffering and let it, but you can make a choice whether to wallow or whether you actually are going to rise above it and do something about that every day. So you need to transcend pain and grow from it, because we all run towards success and we try to escape pain, but some people say, oh, poor me. The reality is that you need to transcend the pain by actually making decisions to overcome it. And for me, that's one of the biggest life lessons, and that goes into business life, it goes into your personal life, it transcends life. So there is one common, we all are going to suffer, Reality is it's just going to show up, whether some of us get cancer, some people break a leg, some people lose their job. That happens to everyone. And the reality is we need to transcend that. And it's your attitude to pain which is actually quite often going to define what you do in life. Wallow or rise above it.
I mean, yeah, suffering, like, that's just part of, there's some days that are obviously not as good as others, but it's definitely how we respond to being. We all have different things that happen to us, but two people may react differently to the same thing, and it's totally up to how we react that determines like how much a certain obstacle impacts us. So, I mean, that is a really great insight, and I'd like to go a little further. At the beginning, you were mentioning how you read the 4-Hour Workweek and you're reading books and blog posts. And I'm wondering if you could recommend 3 great books for breakthrough success listeners that you believe would have a positive impact on us.
Okay, there's one great book, which is by, I think it's Cal Newport. It's called Deep Work. So if you Google Deep Work, it'll come up on an Amazon, on your Google search. Deep work is fabulous because he talks about 2 types of work, deep work and shallow work. Shallow work is doing emails, doing the day-to-day activities. Deep work is actually where you sit down and create something of consequence. And something of consequence could be a blog post of 1,000 words, and then that could turn to a chapter of a book, and then the book could actually become a really bigger extension of this deep work. Because when you actually create, then you actually transform yourself and you transform others. So, because especially on the social web, by actually creating and sharing with the world, you change the world and they change you. And that's the real power of actually being a creator rather than just a consumer. That's a great book. Some other great books to read. I've just read one recently, which is The 12 Laws of Life. That's about some of the deeper insights and a philosophy about life which goes into business. That's a fabulous book. And I'm just trying to think another book that I would recommend. So it's the book by Walter Isaacson on Steve Jobs. That was an incredible book. I read that about 5 years ago. So there's a few other books actually. But on my blog site, I've actually got quite a few references to different books. I write book reviews and share what has touched me and changed me. So if you want some more references, I can maybe provide that to your readers to send through at some stage if you like.
Jeff, thank you for sharing those great book recommendations. And I've seen several of those book reviews on your blog and some of the lists. So I'll link to some of those in the show notes, which everyone can find over at markgilberti.com/E124. And before we wrap up this episode, I'd like to flip the tables a little bit. So Jeff, I've asked you a lot of questions throughout our time together, but what is one question that you believe we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Everyone needs to be asking, why are you here? And that is the big question. It's been asked over the millennia, but the reality is we need to be asking, why are you here on this planet? What is your passionate purpose? And that is your first thing that you should be trying to discover.
It's such it's something we need to be continuing to focus on because sometimes we could forget about very important things like that, and we don't want to go that far without remembering why we're here, what our purpose is, because without that we could be taking the wrong action. So Jeff, thank you for sharing that great question and for sharing all of your great insights throughout our time together. This has been a really amazing for me. Like, I don't think there are enough words to describe it because you were literally the guy at the start of my journey who had this impact on me. So breakthrough success listeners, if you want to have such a big impact, like you want to achieve some really great social media results, I recommend you go to Jeff Bullas' site, which is just jeffbullas.com. I can't say enough good things. I mean, it's just a pleasure to have you on the show, and just thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
Mark, it's been great to share with you and your audience.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn more and get access to this free resource, visit markgilberti.com/